So Ray and Chuck, I wanted to start with y'all. Tell us a little bit about what you do on a daily basis, when you get pulled into deals, and give us some examples of services that you help with.
I'll jump in on that one. When we get involved, it varies from project to project, and depending on how long they've been working on it. Obviously, we like to get involved as early as possible so we can do a value add from that perspective. But our main services are we design what our client can envision and then take it through the permitting process with the city of Fort Worth. It could start with a zoning case, could include a plat, roadway plans, water, sewer, all types of infrastructure, and working it through the review process.
Trees to keys, as I've heard in the past, right?
I'm sorry?
Trees to keys almost.
That's right.
Okay. So talking about development, we as a title attorney, real estate attorney, I have a lot of clients, and we have a lot of clients at the title company that buy unplatted lots, don't tell anybody, or want to buy unplatted lots, or carve out a little piece of land from a larger platted area. We usually have our canned response about it, but we get a lot of questions about it, and really it's not in our bailiwick as a title company. So tell us a little bit, I mean, we know if it's meets and bounds and it's not platted, but so tell us some of what are the delays, what are the requirements, what are the things to be aware of when a individual, a company is buying an unplatted lot because the seller is stubborn and won't allow it to get through the platting process.
That's the biggest challenge we face, probably from a timing perspective. Because if someone is ready to do their project, they're ready to do it now. And if it is unplatted, that is a totally different path that you follow through the development services department, and there's numerous other things that you have to do. And they're very linear. It's very sequential. You have to do this, then you can do this, then you can do this. And the last thing that happens is you get a plat. And so if what you really want is a plat, that's going to be number 15 on the list of what you have to do. And so you have to account for that in the timing. That's where I would say the biggest thing is. You might not have infrastructure. There may be dedications. You may not have as much property as you thought because you've got to dedicate for streets or easements or floodplains. So it's kind of a buyer beware thing there on unplatted lots, that just know that you're in for a lot more work. And you need to put that into your contract, you need to put that into your timing, and allow for that.
And they come to you, they come to Barron-Stark for that, right?
Yes, that's one of the things that we do. But now you're getting into the infrastructure plan review. And one of the things that you don't have generally if you don't have a plat is you don't have an address. And that's the first thing they ask you when you're going for a building permit. What's the address? Well, they say, hey, let's get a plat so we can get an address, and I have to tell them it's going to be 6 to 8 months before we're going to be to the plat, because that's number 15 on the list. That's rather disheartening sometimes.
So there's really good news on that front. Now, I'm super excited, right? Because I tell you guys this, but I'm sincerely not joking, and I'm not providing lip service. Our job at the City of Fort Worth is to be a partner. To be a partner in the development process, to ensure that things are moving through the system in an orderly fashion. And the quicker you're developing, right, the better it is for everyone in the city, because development is the economic engine of any city in the United States. I say all that to say, the good news is there's currently a House bill in the legislature geared towards streamlining that development portion of the development process. So prior to 2019, we were able to, and you may remember this, Chuck, right? We were able to accept your preliminary plat, your infrastructure plans, your studies, and all at the same day, right? In 2019, the legislator created a bill called HB 3167, nicknamed the Shot Clock Bill, when they intended to streamline things, but what it did, it made everything consecutive. Right, so first you got to do your studies, and then you can do a preliminary plat. Then you got to do some more studies. Then you can do a final plat. Then you may have to build infrastructure, right? And then maybe you have to study it again before you get a building permit, right? But again, the intent was to put everyone on the shot clock to do things in a timely fashion, but what it did was it formalized everything and forced it to go to City Plan Commission and other commissions before staff could just approve it administratively. So this House Bill 866 that's currently being reviewed in the legislature will allow for administrative authority for staff. So the shot clock still remains. We still have to do things within a certain prescribed period of time, but we're able to make these approvals administratively instead of having to go to the City Plan Commission. And for those who don't know, the City Plan Commission is an appointed board that reviews all plats and plans as they come through the city of Fort Worth. They're a volunteer board, so they previously only met once a month. Now they meet twice a month in response to the HB 3167. However, why wait 14 days? Like, if your stuff is ready, staff should be able to just approve it and we move on down the road. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that bill pass. It's currently got a lot of synergy in the development community as well as cities across the state. I've actually testified on it earlier in the session. And so hopefully that bill will streamline the way we do business here in Fort Worth and we can get back to where we were in 2019.
And a couple of you mentioned studies, like stormwater studies, traffic impact. Give us some ideas of the studies that you have to do and what paths they run and how fast it takes to get those. And you have to go back out and get maybe another stormwater study with the first one's deficient. What are some of the things, the challenges you see, timing, that sort of thing?
So as part of that planning process, basically there's three major types of studies that, you'll generally run into. So that'll be the water sewer study, right, which is based on the supply and demand, depending on the type of development you have. Same with the traffic, right? It's also based on supply and demand, but it's a traffic impact analysis to see, okay, what does the roadway and the circulation look like, and what is this development going to do to affect that? Right, and should the development construct any roadways or change any circulation patterns in order to facilitate, that being orderly. And then there's a drainage study, to make sure, when you're doing a development that's going to add impervious surface to the site, we want to make sure that the stormwater runoff is safe, right, and that we're not flooding anyone downstream and we don't create hazardous, situations for, pedestrians or folks frequenting the site.
So these items are looked at during the planning process and then again during the permitting process.
Well, they're
Is that
more
right?
prerequisites to getting in the door for the plat.
Correct.
So you have to have your approval letter from each of those three departments before Development Services will accept the plat application. So those are very front end. Now, if you have a small site, like we have an imaging center that's going up by the hospital we're working on, less than an acre. Water and sewer, they waived the study. TPW, they waived the study. And stormwater, it was minimal. So that is an avenue that's available. And the other thing I wanted to throw out, we've talked about the PDC, that was all departments a little earlier. Stormwater has their own department-specific preliminary development conference. And it's just imperative that you take advantage of that opportunity because it's a one-topic meeting and you'll really get a lot of good feedback on what the impacts of your project are and what stormwater is going to, require of you.
And I've seen developers take a big piece of property, put 10 pad sites on there, and go through the platting process saying everything is going to be underground detention. And then they go sell off 10 pad sites, and each of the developers that are putting their different projects on there have to redo all the stormwater analysis and all the engineering studies. Do you see that? Is that a loophole? Is that something that may change with this new bill?
I don't think the bill is going to impact what you just described. That goes back to the original guy that platted up to 10 pad sites. How accurate was he in his vision? Okay? And then his end users, they all have their own vision too and how they think it ought to work. And underground detention is expensive, no doubt about that. But the numbers, volumes, those kind of things, the analytics are the same. It's just how you implement that. So I wanted to throw something on what you had asked earlier. We said, well, you do these studies and you get your plat and then you have to restudy it. No, that's not the way it works, hopefully. The studies establish the baseline configuration of what did you then go design. And if your design, when they review our detailed design, they say, yeah, that's exactly what they talked about in the study. That's great, move on. It's only, like DJ alluded to, if it's totally different than what the study assumed, then you have to take that step back and essentially restudy it or update it for whatever your changed condition is. So again, I know this is hard to do and you have to respond to market conditions, but the best job the developer, the property owner can do of coming up with a good solid plan that's buildable, that meets market demand, fits on the property, you know, all those kind of things will streamline his process tremendously as you go through all the details.
Because there are sometimes takings or necessary land for right-of-ways or whatever it might be during a plating process. Is that, you see that some, Chuck?
Oh,
DJ?
absolutely. I mean, that is the mechanism that the city uses to obtain right-of-way, to obtain the easements. So that's a large component of the plat process, is defining those. In my experience, we've had lots of good success with building permits and platting running concurrently. The city has been very good about going through the full review on the building permit and have everything teed up, just waiting for the plat to file. And so once we finally get all the signatures, I know of instances where we filed a plat on Friday. Fire department is the one that assigns addresses. Fire department gives us an address on Monday, and we have a building permit on Wednesday.
Well,
You know, if everything's just set up for the dominoes to fall just right. But until you get that plat, you will not get the building permit.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. That's good to know. Right, Elizabeth, okay. DJ, talk to you a little more, and Chuck. So tell us a little bit about the process, the permitting process. Like, are there, we've talked about the pre-development meeting. Do you have X teams? Do you have, what kind of process do you go through for the permitting process?
We do have an X team, right? And it's similar to, you know, what Dallas does. I forget what they call it, but basically it's a process set up to allow folks to get a permit in one day. So let me say this before I talk about the X team. So generally, we do have a walk-in center, right? So for both residential and commercial, for commercial projects under $6,000, under 6,000 square feet, you can come into the city and receive the permit that same day, right? So a lot of people don't realize that. So I wanted to make sure I said that. So
Give some more detail on that. Like, what do you have to submit? What do you have to bring in? How does that work?
So there's a checklist online because, you know, depending on the land use, right, there's different requirements, right? But just say you're doing a remodel of an office building, right? And you know, you've got a 4,000 square foot office building that you're doing a remodel, or you got a new tenant coming in, right? So basically, if you're willing to come down to City Hall and give us a few minutes, we'll review it while you wait, and you walk out with a permit, right? And then within 24 hours, we've got an inspector on site, and then hopefully, you know, if there's no findings, 24 hours from that, you have a certificate of occupancy. And so that's a process that, because we were really prepared for COVID because we had already set up an online system. The problem though is folks forget that we're open for business in person, right? And so unfortunately, and this is not by design, it's much easier to get a permit in person if you need it that instant, right? But you know, when you're doing it online, it has to go through several different workflows. And so I just wanted to put that plug out there so that folks know, right, that there is a permitting process that happens in one day quite often, and it is open every day. But then, you know, the X team is for larger projects. I talked about those walk-in permits being less than 6,000 square feet, but above 6,000 square feet, there's an option called the X team. The X team was designed to have folks from every specific discipline. So, you know, you've got your mechanical, you know, MEPs, you got your fire departments, you got your water department, and all those folks in a room laying out your plans and able to give you instant feedback on you know, what we need to change to make this application permittable. A lot of times we don't issue the permit on the spot, which is the goal, but sometimes it's because the consultant engineer or the architect or whomever either didn't realize that was the intent, or can't make the changes, you know, in that instant. So we're working on ways to better that process, to where we set up computer terminals in order to help facilitate those applicants being able to use the software and make those changes on the spot. But that's the goal, you know, of the X-Team project.
And what is the cost of the X teams, and how long does it take to get set up and that sort of thing?
So the X-Team is $1,000 an hour, right, for the review. Basically, if you make an application request within 10 days, you'll have a meeting, and that's a meeting with all the personnel staff. But within about 5 days, you'll have comments that saying, hey, this is the first blush at, you know, what you've submitted, so change X, Y, and Z before you come to that meeting, so that the meeting is more efficient. And so by the time we come to the meeting, hopefully we have an approvable application. If not, there's only minor comments that we can just ink up a red line and make on the spot. You know, that's the basic goal of the process.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the X team is a great thing, okay? It really moves the process through. It's nice to be able to talk, you know, eye to eye across the table from the guy that's reviewing your work, as opposed to being, you know, just an anonymous email that you get. But, so it really does help the process. It is incumbent upon the design team, and I'm talking about the entire team, to bring your A game, have a good product going in, and be ready to respond to whatever the reviewer's comments are, you know, for the process to work. That's very important.
So you have all the different silos of the departments in on the X team at that time,
Typically.
typically?
So what the teams are supposed to do is take a look at the application before it comes in, right? And so let's say the backflow piece is already done, there's no need for the backflow team to show up to this meeting, right? So if it's approvable in its current state, there's no changes need to be made, then theoretically they won't have to show up, right? But the goal is to bring the A team, right, and have everyone there available.
I think it's important to point out the X team is only applicable to the building permit process. There's a totally parallel approval process on the development that involves public infrastructure. And X team doesn't cover that. It's a total different set of people. It's a different permit process. So anyone wanting to develop in Fort Worth needs to recognize that there is a parallel track. And you may have heard the term IPRC, or Infrastructure Plan Review Committee. Those are the people that deal with the public improvements, which is a lot of what we do: streets, water lines, sewer lines, storm drainage. And then you go through that process and you have to create a community facilities agreement, which is where you have to put up the surety that these, if they let you go forward, that you're really going to build these. So, you know, so there's an insurance policy. And the work has to be done by pre-approved contractors, and they have to bond it and, you know, show their insurance and all those type of things. So that is a process unto itself, and it can go in parallel to the building permit in many cases, but don't put all your eggs in the building permit basket and forget about the IPRC.